Welcome to Decision Point. There are few topics that elicit more emotion than the issue of homosexuality. Almost everyone knows someone who is leading a gay lifestyle. The question is, what should be our response as Christians to this dilemma? Well, Pastor Wally Chapman is here because he has effectively ministered in this area. And then also, Lyn McKinley is also here, who has come out of the gay lifestyle and is here to talk about the issues that she faced and how she received healing. Welcome.
Thank you, Holly.
Yeah, it's good to have you both here, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and talk about this very touchy issue, because I think we're now at a kind of a tipping point in our society where people don't see any problem with homosexuality. They just see it as a lifestyle choice, like you're a meat eater or not a meat eater. I mean, it's about at that level. Do you think that that's true at this point?
Seems to be.
Yeah.
And when you said a lifestyle choice, I think that's a very important word, is choice.
Yeah, right.
There's reasons for people going in that choice, but our society's talking so much about you're made that way.
Right.
And if you're made that way, then you're put in prison.
Mm-hmm.
You can never get out of it. It's like having leukemia or some other disease that's just not, it's incurable.
Right.
And yet there's a lot of folks who have found freedom.
Yes, and Lyn, you're an example of that. So can you tell us a little bit about your story, because it's really a very compelling story of your life, and you were married at one point and so forth.
Yes, yes, I was. I was married for 10 years, and I'd say it was a happy marriage, but I'd say we were also more like best friends, really, than husband and wife. And I have been a Christian, I was raised in a Christian home, but have had various times where I kind of fell back, and during my marriage, that was a time when I was not, I did not behave as a believer, even though I did believe in the Lord. And so I think a lot of issues that I came into the world with, the way I was raised, I always identified more with my brothers. I had two older brothers. I followed them everywhere. Mm-hmm. I really attached to them instead of attaching to my mother. Mm-hmm. And so, I was playing football and riding bikes, and I remember having a girl come over to play, and she wanted to play dolls, and I just thought that was the most boring thing I had no interest whatsoever. I never wanted a doll. I never received one, and I just was completely identified as a boy.
Mm-hmm. And so, but you nevertheless did get married and had a relatively good marriage until, I guess, it began to unravel and you got divorced. Is that right?
Yes, that's true.
And then at that point, was that when you went into the lesbian lifestyle? Or
it is. It's the time when I allowed myself to say, now I'm free. Now I can do what I want. And I had definitely been attracted to women while I was married. And so once I became single, that just gave me the opportunity to pursue what I had found an attraction to already.
Right. So many people would say that you were legitimately a lesbian, that you had the predilections that a lot of people associate with not relating to, the opposite sex. And so how did you, after several years in that lifestyle and having relationships and so forth, how did you decide to come out of that lifestyle at what point?
Well, I had been in several relationships, and I would always come to a point in a relationship where I couldn't go any further. And I think that point was when the Lord convicted me of what I was doing, although I didn't understand it as conviction from the Lord. I just knew that something would always go wrong. And I just decided at one point, I don't want to do this anymore. And it was a conscious decision that I made. And I just decided to break off all contact. I lived in Las Cruces at the time. I moved to El Paso. I got very involved in church here in El Paso, and I just basically said, I'm going to get away from this. And that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah. And so you didn't have a program that helped you come out of it. It was more just your church family and the support that you had spiritually and that sort of thing.
Yes, I had a couple who I had met previously before I lived in El Paso, and they had ministered to a lot of people coming out of the lifestyle.
Okay.
So they had a lot of experience, and they really stood by me and encouraged me to stand firm. And they also allowed Jesus to walk alongside me, and that was just a key to my healing, was the presence of Jesus. And
so you had to really rekindle and get back in touch with your faith in order to make this successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it was always a battle for me. I mean, I really came back to my faith when I got divorced, because I had become very codependent on my husband. And, you know, when you're codependent and that person leaves your life, you struggle greatly.
Yeah, that was a real bottom.
That was definitely a bottom.
Yeah, right.
But I had to hit several bottoms, personally. So,
yeah. Well, Pastor, how did you get involved in ministry to homosexuals? That's not something that you set out to do particularly, right?
Right. Early in ministry, there was a young man, two young men in the church, teenagers that were, one of them, a boy, was sort of not accepted by his dad. His dad was quite an athlete, sportsman, everything else, and he wasn't. And I found that as I studied on, that's often the transition that doesn't happen, of that relationship with your dad is bad. And probably, some statistics I read, where 90% of people in the homosexual lifestyle had a bad relationship with their dad, the men.
The men,
Or an
the male.
abandoned,
Yeah, right.
or an abandoned father, or abusive, or something like that. And,
I would say, Holly, that's definitely true
Really?
in my case. Absolutely.
And that was with your mother, right?
Right. Tremendous. She was completely emotionally unavailable. And the reason I latched onto my brothers was because I needed somebody to latch onto, because she and I just never were able to make that connection. So I agree that that's a
key
large
factor.
component, yes.
Yeah.
And the other boy, his father had abandoned him, and his mother had remarried, and the man that adopted him had in the family wanted to adopt him. He wouldn't let that happen. Eventually, he said, "I'm moving to Houston. I'm going to do barber school." And he had gone to a church previously in San Francisco, a gay church, and said, "I couldn't stand that," and went to Houston, got involved in the homosexual lifestyle. And the next time I visited with him, he's dying of AIDS. He came back home, and I realized that here's a whole lot of people that are hurting terribly, and the church is not doing much, and the society is saying the church is just a bunch of bigots, which isn't true, but we often don't know what to do. And so I started doing some interest in that, and then we did Celebrate Recovery at the church, and guys showed up for the men's side who were dealing with pornography, and found out that, of course, that's part of the other lifestyle. And in that, then they dealt with their homosexual issue, and they left the lifestyle. And
So how does Celebrate Recovery, which is a 12-step based program, help people out of that lifestyle? Because there are many people who would say that, for example, I have a relative who was a lesbian, and she went into recovery for alcoholism, but that didn't change her lesbian orientation at that point anyway. So how did that work in your particular case?
well, with the guys that were there, they found their faith. They found a relationship with Christ. One hadn't been a believer and became a believer and found that he got victory. The other one had been a believer and was struggling with the pornography, and in the process of that, as he was dealing with other issues, because Celebrate Recovery deals with your issues in life, not just what the problem you come with.
Right,
you know,
sure.
you've got a whole bunch of baggage, and so as he was working through that, he dealt with what led him into the homosexual lifestyle.
Right.
And
Well, and so the things that lead them into the homosexual lifestyle or lesbian lifestyle would be woundedness.
Yes.
In early life, particularly,
yeah, and wanting to be accepted, and you have a poor self-image often, and want to be accepted by other men, and so sometimes the athletes and the jocks don't have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
And they make fun of you, and kids in school call you names, and so eventually you kind of drift to where you can find help. Or for one of them, he was finding his help in pornography.
Right. Well, and how does pornography play into the whole gender confusion issue?
I don't know about all of it, but I do know one thing is that it does help people feel like they're of value. They have control over it as they look at the pornography from a guy's point of view. And they have control over what's going on. They get some satisfaction. Then they feel bad afterwards often because
Guilty.
it doesn't last. It's an immediate sort of like the alcohol, the drink that satisfies the problem, and then the next day it's gone back there with you again.
So how do you know if you have a problem?
How do you
know? With pornography or homosexuality or lesbian, whatever. How do you know if you have a problem?
I think if it's
do you have to start manifesting the behaviors before you have a problem?
It seems like it. I mean, a lot of pornography is thrown in front of guys from when they're little.
Sure.
In our society, any movie you go to is going to have nudity in it, and from a guy's point of view, he gets aroused very quickly, and so it's an addictive thing. And for a guy, it's almost like a visual file that's in your mind. You see it, and then it's a flashback. You know, ladies have flashbacks from other things. You guys. But for a guy, it's a picture, and it never goes away. And so you have all of these things, and as you watch more and more, this file gets larger and larger, and it becomes more and more controlling. And then you just start thinking of sex a lot.
So how did coming out of that homosexual lifestyle affect these guys? Because when you have that as a lifestyle, or maybe I should ask you that question. But I mean, you had real challenges coming out of the lifestyle, not only for you personally, but also people around you, right? And the people, the lesbians that you would associate with, or the homosexuals you associated with previously. So
exactly.
How was that?
Well,
what was that like?
It was quite difficult because that's your support system. That's the people you've hung out with, and those are women you've dated and become close to. And so for me, I just decided I need to completely remove myself from any possibility of running into anyone anywhere. So that was why I chose to move to El Paso from Las Cruces. Las Cruces is a close-knit community, and the gay community there, the lesbian community, is very close-knit. And so that was just something I felt like I had to do to take a positive step towards recovery.
And how did people in that community or people in El Paso who might have known receive your leaving the lifestyle?
Well, actually, that's an interesting question. There were about 3 people who I kind of wanted to say goodbye to. So I did that, and each one was very receptive to what I was doing. They completely understood, and then I had a different response when in El Paso, because I did know a woman in El Paso, and she told me, "Oh, you'll be back," and I just knew I wouldn't be back.
Right. Yeah. How do you think? How does it feel to be in that lifestyle? I mean, to help people to understand, do people come to the point where they accept it and embrace it, or is there always some underlying confusion or disharmony? What have you found?
Well, I think in observing people that I was, going to parties and things like that, just people that I hung out with, there was always something missing. And there was always an element of sameness that just didn't work. Just a woman needs a man, and a woman needs certain things out of a man that don't have anything to do with sexuality, but she fits with a man better than she fits with a woman. That's just what I saw. And I just realized that there were a lot of lost women I was hanging out with. And
would you agree with Pastor that most of those women came into that lifestyle out of woundedness of some kind, or
absolutely, absolutely, a lot of wounded. A lot of them had been married, and I think each one comes out of a lot of woundedness. I went to a healing conference at one point, and one of the things I learned there was that all lesbians are codependent. Not all codependents are lesbians, but all lesbians are codependent, and I really believe that that's the case.
By that, how would you define that for people?
Codependency is just relying on someone else for your sense of self, and you basically drain the other person to satisfy what you lack, you seek in the other person, and that's looking at it from a relational, sexual viewpoint. As far as just relationally, it's just a lot of issues, lack of self-esteem, a lot of issues with not connecting with a parent, usually a same-sex parent, and just trying to work through those issues in the 12-step program. Right.
So, would you agree that in fact that the concept that someone can be gay and lead a completely normal lifestyle from a spiritual, emotional perspective, and that it's just a perception issue or a homophobic issue for those who don't accept the lifestyle? What's been your experience in ministering to homosexuals or lesbians?
Most are empty inside. There's a need that's there. When they come to Christ, they find that need. Most are very angry. They've been hurt, and hurt people. And they're just out to try to establish. I mean, if you look at what's being done, the amount of money that goes into promoting the gay lifestyle by the gays, good businessmen, they both live together, they both got full salaries, and the money's just pumped in to promote it. And yet, the ones I've run across aren't happy inside. There's an empty. Many won't say that.
Right.
That's exactly.
But inside, there's an emptiness.
They won't admit it, but it's there.
Nobody was happy, even though they put on this persona of being happy.
Yeah. And Christ gives a real purpose for life and a forgiveness, and He brings you back in. And I think that's the whole message of the gospel. But our society is saying that we're bigoted and we don't care. And really, sometimes we haven't acted like we care.
Right. Yeah. Now, what about people who, and there are many denominations, the Episcopal Church, for example, and some of the others, think homosexuality is okay. In fact, ordain homosexual priests and so forth. So, how do you think they can justify the homosexual lifestyle? Because I know homosexuals who are Christians, and they're still living the lifestyle. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, partly I think we all are sinners. We all are failing somewhere, you know, whether it's lying or cheating or whatever. But the Bible says that it's a sin. And I think in 1 Corinthians 6 is so good, where Paul describes all these people who are going to be punished. And he mentions homosexuality, and mentions thieves, he mentions everything. And then he says, and such were some of you, but you've been washed, you've been cleansed. And he gives a whole new life. Now, we used to be in a denomination, our church was, that did this, and that's part of the reason we left. But they kept saying, well, you just need to love everyone. But that doesn't mean you do away with what the principles are. And unfortunately, churches, when they have someone in their family, a person has someone in their family who's homosexual, instead of dealing biblically with it, they just throw out the Bible. And they say, well, then it's not wrong. I'll just love them. I've got to care for them. Well, we have to do that, of course. But how do you give anybody hope if there's no hope outside there and they're just locked in their prison?
So how is homosexuality as a sin any different than any other sin?
Scripturally, it's not. They're all mentioned as different. We've all fallen short. Adultery, homosexuality. It says swindlers and liars. In fact, in Revelation, it says all liars will be thrown in the flaming lake. Well, that puts all of us in a bad shape at the end. But Christ has forgiven us. We just have others that we hide under the, it's okay if I gossip. It's okay if I do this, but you better not catch me in bed with someone else. But they're all, in God's eyes, wrong. And until we get past where we are, it's not going to make a difference.
Lyn, did you experience, since you've come into recovery, so to speak, from your gender confusion. Have you experienced or insensitivity on the part of Christians at all?
Well, that's an interesting question because I was really, I knew what I was doing was wrong. But I was just making this choice to continue to pursue, just take it a little bit further and further, getting involved in the gay community. And I talked to some more mature Christians and I said, I really need some help. And they have since apologized to me, but they basically hit me with the Bible and told me I needed to get down on my knees and ask God for forgiveness. And so I did like a 180 and I just said, forget it. I'm not going to do that, and I don't believe that. And I went to the pastor of my church, and he basically said, you need to change churches. We can't help you. And so I just went further in, just further into the lifestyle.
So that was absolutely the wrong response.
Yeah, it is, and that's unfortunate because I think there are parts of that response that are accurate because it is a sin. But then, how did Jesus treat sinners? He walked alongside them. He ate with them. He spent time with them.
Right.
And he didn't convict them constantly.
Right.
And I think what happened in my case is this ministry couple, they walked alongside me, and I was having a lot of people pray for me and doing a lot of searching and everything. And I think it would have been very detrimental to me if I knew that my church supported the gay lifestyle, because that would have been one more avenue for me. That would have been one more open door to go deeper and deeper into it. So the couple who ministered to me walked alongside me, and then at a certain point, Jesus did confront me and ask me to make a choice. But see, Jesus asked me to make the choice, and a church person didn't ask. Jesus asked me in the right way.
Right. He was able to. His Holy Spirit was able to get through in a way that you could receive it. Yeah.
Right.
So, what is the right response if someone reveals that they're having homosexual leanings or gender confusion? What's the right response for someone if someone told you that?
Well, it's a process too, because the first time there was a guy in our Celebrate Recovery who I knew, in our group we knew he was homosexual and wanted to get out, but no one else in the whole group did. And the process was hugging everybody. So the first time I went up to hug him, I'm thinking, I hope I'm not encouraging him in the lifestyle, because I didn't know, you know what I mean? And I think that's one of the things in the church is that we are so afraid and we don't know, and for some people they're very repulsed at the idea, but they don't do anything to learn and educate how Jesus would do it. Focus on the Family has some good resources, and you just dial 1-800-A-FAMILY, and they have a course called Love One Out, W-O-N out, and they got a lot of great information to help you learn where people are coming from in their own personal life. And there's a group called Regeneration that do the same. Right. And there's Exodus has worked on groups. So
we have a local physician who has a group as well. What the name of that group is?
It's called PFOX.
PFOX, right.
Parents, Friends, and of ex-gays.
Right, yeah.
And so anybody who wants to come and know about it, they only meet every other month, and their next month meeting is the 1st of July.
Right.
And
well, one of the things that and we're running out of time on this very important topic, is it gets back to something you said, and that is how people who have a family member or parents who have a child who go into the gay lifestyle, all of a sudden they're confronted with either accept me as I am, or our relationship is severed, and it creates a lot of tension. And so, as you say, people often cave, parents often cave. And so can you tell us how, if a parent or a relative of a gay person can stand firm in a Christian way, but still be loving and try to coexist, so to speak, at least?
I would say pray for them. Get to know your scriptures and get to know what it is. Don't take the lie that they're made this way. It's an emotional change, and find out what's going on. Get some help finding information. You would do that.
Should you argue with them? Should you tell them, it's a sin? I mean, what's most effective if someone has a child who's gay, for example, in terms of communicating love but not caving?
Well, that's an interesting question. I never told my parents I was a late arrival in life, and they were elderly, and I couldn't, really, because I knew it was wrong, and I knew they would be ashamed of me, basically. I did tell one brother about it. I think it's something that you do have to pray about, and it's something that Jesus has to really guide you in, because if you try to do it yourself, it's going to be much more difficult. So I would encourage parents to keep an open door, to state what their beliefs are, but say, I love you, and we're going to walk through this, and pray like crazy for them. Because Jesus is the only way to get through it.
Right. Yeah.
And if there's been a dysfunctional relationship with your parents before, if you tell them, well, if you keep doing this, you're going to hell, or something else, that's already creating a bigger gap.
That's exactly
and
the
so
wrong thing
that's
to
why I
do.
was saying, find out what's going on in your children's life, what's happening, and try to build a relationship back with them.
Right. Yeah.
And that may be hard, but it hasn't been there, and so it needs to be.
So it's not so if you have, and there are a lot of teenagers who are incredibly confused about this issue, and we're seeing a lot in the ministry, and so the important thing is to go to the deeper issues rather than hitting at the surface, which is the behavior, homosexual or lesbian behavior or leanings or what have you. So to get underneath what that means and keep that relationship strong, but don't abandon. As you said, the Christian perspective is what finally brought you into a place of healing, right?
Absolutely.
And so abandoning that basically truly is leaving them in a very, very wounded lifestyle.
Plus, another subject down the road would be how much of this is being encouraged and taught in our schools.
Right.
Because it is. I have a textbook from 3rd grade teaching about two mommies and showing them in bed together and all this for 3rd graders.
Yeah.
And it's being taught.
So we are really now in the minority culture where this comes to. And so thank you so much for being here, both of you, and Lyn especially, for your courage in speaking out about this. And so what do you think about how a Christian should respond to homosexuality and lesbianism? Is Pastor Chapman right? What do you think about Lyn's experience coming out of the lifestyle? Tell us what you think on Facebook, Twitter, or our website at kscetv.org. Thank you so much for watching.